I'm too old to learn anything new, you think. My memory just isn't what it used to be. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many people believe that once you hit a certain age, your brain stops improving, that forgetfulness is just a part of getting older. But here's the truth. Your brain is still capable of learning, remembering, and staying sharp, no matter how old you are. Science has proven that even after 60, 70 and beyond, your brain can still grow new connections and strengthen memory. In fact, some of history's greatest minds, Einstein, Da Vinci, and Benjamin Franklin, did their best thinking later in life. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This is just another one of those videos that wastes time before actually telling me something useful. That's not what we do here. No fluff, no nonsense, just simple science-backed techniques to help you train your brain to remember more, learn faster, and keep your mind sharp for years to come. Let's get into it. 1. The chunking method. How to remember more with less effort. Ever tried to memorize a long grocery list or a phone number, only to forget half of it moments later? That's not because your memory is failing. It's because your brain isn't designed to store long, scattered pieces of information all at once. Instead, your brain works best when it groups things into smaller, meaningful chunks, a technique called chunking. Think about how we naturally remember phone numbers. It's easier to recall 123 456 789 than 123 456 7 and 9 because the numbers are broken into smaller, manageable parts. In fact, studies show that the brain can only hold about 4 to 7 pieces of information at a time in short-term memory. But when we chunk information together, we can remember far more with much less effort. The good news? You can use this same method to remember names, lists, and even new facts more easily. Wait, but I don't remember doing this. When I was younger, you might be thinking, if chunking is so powerful, why don't I remember using it when I was younger? Doesn't that mean my memory is just getting worse? Here's the thing. You actually were using chunking when you were younger, but you didn't notice it. Think about how you learned language, numbers, or even your home address as a child. Your brain naturally grouped letters into words, numbers into patterns, and concepts into familiar categories. But because your memory was already strong back then, you didn't need to think about it consciously. As we get older, we rely more on shortcuts, phones, notes, calendars, and we stop actively training our brain. It's not that your memory has disappeared, it's just that it hasn't been exercised in a while. That's the key difference. Chunking is something you can train yourself to use more consciously now, and it will make a huge difference. How to use chunking in daily life. For grocery lists. Instead of remembering a long list like milk, eggs, bread, chicken, carrots, apples, and rice as separate items, group them. Dairy, milk, eggs. Grains, bread, rice. Protein, chicken. Produce, carrots, apples. By mentally organizing information into categories, you create natural associations that help your brain store and recall them faster. For remembering names, meeting a group of people at a party or event. Instead of trying to recall random names, chunk them by their relationship to you. These are my neighbor's friends. A physical feature. All three have glasses. A shared interest. They all love gardening. The next time you see them, your brain will connect them to the group rather than trying to recall each name separately. For numbers and addresses. When memorizing a long number, break it into smaller groups. Instead of 3548239107, remember it as 354-823-9107. Instead of a long address like 742 Evergreen Terrace, Springfield, Illinois, break it into sections. House number, street, city, state. This technique is so effective that even world memory champions use it to recall long sequences of numbers or cards in a deck. Even expert chess players rely on chunking. Instead of memorizing every single piece on a board, they see patterns, entire formations of pieces as a single chunk, which is why they can recall game positions far better than beginners. The best part? Chunking doesn't require any fancy tricks. It's just a smarter way to store information in your brain. How to train your brain? With chunking. You don't have to wait until you need to memorize something important. You can start training your brain with chunking today. Here's a simple exercise. 1. Pick a long number, a phone number, a street number, or even a random set of digits. 2. Break it into groups of 3 or 4 digits. 3. Try to recall it later without looking. See how much easier it is. Another great way to practice is by using chunking to remember new words. For example, if you're learning a foreign language, instead of memorizing single words, group them by theme, e.g., food words, travel words, greeting words. If you've ever felt frustrated because you keep forgetting things, remember, it's not your memory that's failing, it's just the way you're storing information. Once you start using chunking, you'll notice how much easier it is to retain details without feeling overwhelmed. Now, let's move on to method number 2, the storytelling technique, which turns forgettable facts into vivid, lasting memories. 2. The storytelling technique. Turn forgettable facts into lasting memories. Have you ever struggled to remember a piece of information, maybe a fact from a book, a new name, or an important date, only to have it slip away just moments later? But then, there are other things you never seem to forget. You remember childhood stories, funny moments with friends, or something shocking you read years ago. Why? Because your brain is designed to remember stories, not random facts. That's where the storytelling technique comes in. By turning information into a simple story, you make it 10 times easier to recall. So, instead of trying to memorize things in a boring, difficult way, connect the information to a vivid, emotional, or personal story. How to use storytelling to remember anything for remembering names. Let's say you meet a man named Charlie. Instead of just repeating Charlie, Charlie, Charlie in your head and forgetting later, attach him to a story. Maybe Charlie reminds you of Charlie Chaplin. Imagine him wearing a little hat and doing a funny dance. If he has a big beard, picture him as a lumberjack chopping wood in the forest. The crazier and more personal the image, the better your brain remembers it. For important dates or numbers, if you need to remember 1942, don't just memorize the digits. Turn it into a quick mental story. Imagine a clock striking 19, military time, till 7 p.m. And then you see 42 playing cards falling from the sky. Or, if 1942 reminds you of a historical event or personal moment, use that connection. For learning new information, trying to remember that the heart pumps 2,000 gallons of blood a day. Picture a giant water pump working tirelessly. Every second, it gushes out big buckets of water into a flowing river. Now, every time you think about how much blood your heart pumps, you'll see the water pump, and remember, the more emotion and imagery, the better. Your brain doesn't remember boring things, it remembers things that feel real. Make it personal, attach it to something from your life, make it vivid. Use crazy, exaggerated images, make it emotional, funny, surprising, or even shocking stories stick in your memory. If you're thinking, this sounds fun, but will it really help my memory? The answer is yes. Even if you've never used storytelling like this before, your brain already does this automatically. You never had to memorize your favorite childhood memory. It stuck with you because it was a vivid story. Now, you're just using this technique on purpose. Now, let's move on to method number 3, the visualization trick, which uses mental images to lock in new information instantly. 3. The visualization trick. Why your brain loves pictures. Have you ever noticed that you can easily remember faces but struggle to remember names? Or that you can picture an old childhood home in great detail, even if you haven't seen it in decades? That's because your brain processes images 60,000 times faster than words. When you read or hear something, your brain doesn't store the words, it stores the meaning behind them. And the easiest way for your brain to store meaning? Through pictures. This is why the visualization trick works so well. By turning abstract information into a mental image, you make it easier to remember. How to use visualization to remember anything. For remembering names. If you meet someone named Rose, don't just repeat the name in your head. Visualize a big red rose next to their face. The next time you see them, the rose will trigger their name in your memory. If the name is something harder to picture, break it down. For a name like Mr. Carpenter, visualize him building a wooden chair with a hammer. For a name like Linda, picture her standing on a beach with ocean waves, L for Linda, L for lagoon. For learning new words or concepts, Say you want to remember that Paris is the capital of France. Picture the Eiffel Tower made of French bread, a baguette. Now, your brain links Paris with France instantly. For remembering where you put things, ever forgotten where you put your keys or glasses? Instead of mindlessly setting them down, pause for a second and imagine them glowing brightly where you placed them. This brief visualization helps your brain register the location. For important to-do lists, need to buy milk, bananas, and bread at the store. Imagine a giant banana wearing a milk carton as a hat and holding a loaf of bread like a suitcase. The sillier the image, the easier it is to remember. Why this works? The science behind visualization studies show that people remember 65% more when information is paired with images rather than just words. The method of Loci, memory palace, an ancient memory technique used by Greek scholars, relies on visualization. They would imagine information placed in different rooms of a house, then walk through it to recall details. If you're thinking, "But I'm not a visual person," don't worry. Everyone's brain works this way. Even this video is doing the same effect. We're not just bringing up scenery's picture like other channel, but also bringing up illustration of people. Your age doing things we brought up. This information will stick with you for long. Even if you don't consciously picture things, your brain is already making visual connections behind the scenes. By practicing this technique, you're simply using what your brain already does, on purpose. Now, let's move on to method number 4, the Feynman technique, which helps you learn and remember anything by teaching it to someone else. 4. The Feynman technique is teach it to remember it. Have you ever noticed that when you explain something to someone else, you suddenly understand it better yourself? That's because teaching forces your brain to organize information, making it easier to recall later. This is called the Feynman technique, named after Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, who believed that the best way to truly learn something is to explain it in the simplest way possible. How to use the Feynman technique to strengthen your memory. Step 1. Learn something new. Read an interesting article, watch a documentary, or learn a new fact. Step 2. Explain it to someone else. Instead of keeping it in your head, tell a grandchild, a friend, or even your spouse about it. If you get stuck, it means you need to simplify it even more. Step 3. Make it simple. Strip away unnecessary details. Explain it like you're telling a story instead of listing facts. The easier it is to say, the stronger the memory becomes. Step 4. Say it out loud or write it down. Even if no one is around, saying it out loud helps your brain lock in the information. Or jot it down in a small notebook. This reinforces memory even further. Why this works? The science behind teaching and memory studies show that we remember 90% of what we teach, but only 10% of what we read. Teaching forces the brain to restructure and simplify information, making it easier to recall later. Talking to others is one of the best brain exercises because you're constantly recalling, explaining, and processing information in real time. Join a book club or discussion group. Sharing ideas helps you remember them better. Teach something small to a friend or family member, even if it's just a fun fact or a piece of advice. Go out and engage in conversations. The more you socialize, the more your brain stays active. You don't need to be a teacher to use this method. Just make it a habit to share what you learn. Even if you're only explaining things to yourself, you'll notice how much easier it is to recall information. By now, you've learned 4 powerful techniques that can help you train your brain to learn and remember things more easily. Chunking storytelling visualization. The Feynman technique. But here's something important to remember. You don't need to force your brain to learn too much at once. In fact, the brain actually learns better when you take your time, absorb information in small pieces, and review it gradually. And that's exactly why we're stopping here for now. There are more techniques to explore, but in this video, we want to give you a chance to pause, reflect, and practice what you've learned so far. So before you move on, take a moment to think about which of these techniques stood out to you the most? How can you start applying them in your daily life? When you're ready, check out Part 2, where we'll cover even more science-backed techniques. Click here to watch Part 2 now. And if you found this helpful, hit the like button and subscribe for more brain-boosting tips. Share this with a friend or family member who might benefit from it. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in part 2.